Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage AAPC President Becky Donatelli and AAPC Vice President Larry Wynn.
Okay, Larry, what's the hardest thing on earth? Separating a political consultant from chit-chat and cocktails. We're trying to get everybody in so we can get started, but it's so much fun here. Do you guys love La Quinta? Everything here is great. The weather is great. The flowers are beautiful. It's a lovely day. Just want to remind everybody, though, you are in the desert. Please hydrate. It sneaks up on you. You will not feel good in the morning. Every time you have a cocktail, have a glass of water, too. Anyway, so the first thing I would like to do is actually put up the slide about the conference. So this conference, guys, is amazing. We are growing. We are doing more good things for our industry. We are earning money along the way. We are increasing the size of our staff. This is the biggest Polly conference we have ever had. There are over 950 people registered for this conference who will be here over the next couple of days. Thank you, you guys. This is what we do this for. So I'm going to just look at the stats. We had a first-timers lunch today that was fantastic. Every seat in the room was filled. These people were either new members or this was their first time at a Polly conference. You can see on the slide that 530 individual firms entered the Polly contest itself. We had 3,000 plus Polly entries, which is the most ever. Our 40 under 40 entrants, 260. And today, the golf tournament, we've never done a golf tournament before, so the golf tournament today was on behalf and benefiting the AAPC Foundation, and we've raised at least $50,000 through our inaugural golf tournament. In fact, I met the golfers. I don't know if they're in the room or not. I met them outside, the ones who won the tournament and one of the putt-putt contests. Are you here in the room? Yeah, okay, they're still out having fun, but maybe they'll come in. They're missing their round of applause. So none of this gets done without a lot of volunteer help. We have 10 paid staff. We had 4 or 5 a year ago. We are really growing this association, and they are fantastic. But we cannot do this without our volunteers. And so we have on the slide the planning committee who met every week, week after week after week after week, thinking about interesting programming, people to invite. So you see the slide behind me, but would our planning committee members who are in the room stand up so that we can applaud you? Thank you very much. We also would like to recognize the officers of the association. So this is the meeting in which we elect our new officers for the next 2 years. And so in recognition of this year's officers, Rose Kapelczynski, who is our immediate past president. I am president. Larry Wynn, who will be the new president of the association on July 1st. Kyle Roberts, who was elected vice president of the association, and Danielle Sendejas was elected to be our new secretary. And Jennifer Matthews, we want to say thank you to for being a great secretary for the last 2 years. And Trey Richardson, our treasurer, who's been reelected again because he never gets to not be treasurer. You all know this. Once you find a good one, that's it. So, the last thing I'd like to say is because this is a volunteer organization, people need to serve on committees, they need to serve on boards, and we don't always know who's interested in doing that. So if you want to perhaps serve on our board of directors or serve on a committee or a regional committee, regional conference, please go to our website. There's a link It's not up right now, it will be shortly. On the homepage that you can signify your interest, fill out a little short form, and let us know what you would like to do to help AAPC grow. We are just exploding, and we need everybody's help. So thank you very much for that. So lastly, Larry, I don't know if you guys remember this, but during COVID, he became somewhat of a Facebook Live YouTube star
I wish.
mixing amazing cocktails. So the last two conferences, we have begun the conference with one of Larry's great cocktails. And so today, we're getting the prickly pear margarita, yes?
Yes, that's right. So here we go. We're going to mix it, but we would never drink alone. So I think there's some stuff coming out to make sure that we can share this all together. But let me start doing this. Again, I have not become the influencer I was hoping to become. So that's very unfortunate. First thing, I'm going to do this. It's going to be 2 ounces of tequila. Silver is fine. You don't need to get fancy. You have so many mixers in there. Why waste the good stuff, honestly? That's just like a rookie mistake, and you're just trying to show off. And then, oh, sorry, I got to double this or else Becky's going to get left out. No, this is for Becky. And then 1.5 of triple sec. Or you can use some other orange liqueur. You could try Cointreau, Grand Marnier, those sorts of options. I love Pierre Ferrand. Their orange curacao is pretty amazing, actually. That is highly recommended. Lime juice, or I guess this is probably going to be sour mix. I might not go so heavy because well, maybe it's real. We'll see. We'll taste it. And I do. I can't do that stuff unless it's good. And so, yes, I squeeze my own limes because, I mean, I'm not a monster. So, anyway, then add ice, obviously. And, oh, how am I going to shake this up? They didn't even get, oh. Yeah, this isn't going to work. Oh, maybe they stir it. They can stir it. Yeah, that's why there's a spoon. Anyway, you know, prickly pear syrup is because we're here in the desert, and it comes from cacti, I believe, or some kind of succulent, and that's why we're doing it out here. Did everyone get? Do they have their drinks? Or, oh yeah, they're coming.
So here come the drinks.
So I do want to toast to everyone here for making this a great conference so far. Don't screw it up. We still have 2 more days. So really, it's really exciting. I cannot believe how big this conference is. When we were thinking about this a year ago, and Becky was like, why don't we do Palm Desert? And I was just like, I guess so. And then she said, La Quinta's nice. I was like, okay. La Quinta's nice. I can confirm that now. I think we all can confirm that. But cheers to everyone. Have a great conference. And thank you and support the association.
Yay! I love your habit. And away we go.
All right. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. All right, that's better. Thank you. Come on, let's get fired up. We're getting ready to talk with the media. I know you all love that. Thank God we have cocktails.
Where's our cocktails?
Yeah, we're supposed to have cocktails up here for these folks, but maybe they need to earn them first. Look, we're having a conversation tonight with the media, some members of the media that are very well esteemed, well known. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. We're going to chat for a little while, and then we'll have some questions at the end. But we want to have a conversation about how they relate to us in our industry, how we go about interacting with them in the sort of modern world that we live in and the new changing dynamics of the media landscape. So first of all, I'll introduce myself. I'm Mike Shields. I'm a board member of AAPC, and I'm also formerly a CNN contributor. I run a company called Convergence Media. But I'd like to introduce, have each one of you say something a little bit about yourselves as we go. I want to start with Ali Vitale with NBC News.
Hi guys, I'm Allie. If you're in the back and you're drinking, come forward. It'll just make us feel more comfortable, I think. I work at NBC and MSNBC, and I'm also the author of a book called Electable: Why America Hasn't Put a Woman in the White House Yet, and I've been at NBC for 10 years.
And next to her is Maeve Reston from The Washington Post.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having us. I started my career in regional newspapers back at the Austin
Look at
American
the
Statesman
service.
and the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and kind of like worked my way up. I know that's totally like old school now.
It's a good introduction.
Oh yeah, thanks.
Sorry, I'm so.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And then ended up going to the LA Times and then CNN, and now back at the Washington Post, my spiritual home of print. So I've sort of done the whole media landscape along the way.
Thank you. And next to her is Chris Starwalt from the Dispatch and many other things.
I was born in a log cabin I built with my own two hands. It is an extraordinary honor, pleasure to be with journalists who I respect and who I'm getting to know. This is a good group. This is an important discussion. But I have to tell you, when we were flying in today, there was a lot of wind in the plane. I don't know, there were a bunch of people, there were like 50 people at least from this conference who were on the flight that was connecting from Phoenix. And the plane was coming in and the wind was really strong and I didn't know what was gonna happen. And I thought, you know, if this plane goes down, there will be really serious consequences for the country. You've got all of these serious Politico people, you've got these serious, the brain trust of American politics, you've got media figures, you've got prominent journalists, you've got people from media corporations. Serious consequences would have happened. For example, where would they hold the celebratory parade? Where would they do that? Huge questions would be answered. No, it's a great pleasure to be with you guys. Thank you for having me.
And next to Chris is Marisa Lagos of KQED from the Bay Area.
Not sure how to follow that. I am, with KQED. We're an NPR station in the Bay Area. We also produce programming that goes across California. I started my career in newspapers at the LA Times. I was an intern straight out of college and freelanced for them for a while. I was at the Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner. I came over to radio and TV. Let's see. I always do the math. My oldest kid is 7, so 8 years ago. And yeah, I've covered city halls, parks and recs, state government, federal government. So I think we got the gamut here.
Okay, so I'm going to start with Allie, but everyone jump in. Please just make this a conversation if you have other thoughts about this. I want to start by asking you how you think this election cycle will be covered differently. What are the trends that we see that are happening in 24 that will make this coverage different than we've seen before? Or how will things actually just be the same because there's some things that always seem to happen in covering elections?
I mean, I think the same, if you look at 2016, is sort of the question that I think a lot of us are going to try to answer now, back in a somewhat open Republican primary, what the role of Trump is, how much coverage he ends up dominating, because I know that was a campaign that I covered, that was a campaign that all of us covered, and we knew what that news cycle churn looked like. I think now what makes it different than that same question of what the Trump factor is, and I know everyone is trying to figure that out, probably many of you in this room, I think the difference is the way that he's in the news, which is to say through potential indictments, through actual indictments, through, you know, a campaign that's sort of stopping and starting and not really looking like it used to. And so I think there's a different way of covering him, especially in the shadow of January 6th, that I think about a lot, and I know that all of our networks and newspapers are thinking about a lot too.
And I think it also feels like the sort of novelty of Trump that existed in 2016 is no longer there. And it's so interesting because in many ways, like, he has a more traditional and robust campaign team than a lot of the other candidates and potential candidates who seem to be experimenting with different ways of dealing with the press to varying effects. And so it's been really interesting to watch the way in which his team is maneuvering this time in a much more kind of professional and straightforward way, whereas the last time it was kind of all over the place. So.
Care to add to that?
Well, I think like one big X factor is Twitter. Like, will it exist?
Yes.
I mean, seriously, I think already it's changing so much, and so much of the conversation really starting in 2016 among all of us, occurs on Twitter. I just got a new phone last week and I can't figure out how to log in to my Twitter account, and I'm kind of like, that's okay. I'll check
If
it
you
on my
got logged
desktop.
out, would it be the worst thing?
Right, I mean, and I think 4 years ago I would have been like freaking out. But that to me feels like a big X factor. Like where will the conversation be happening? I mean, obviously a lot of our job is to get it to the public, but I think like social media has been more than anything else kind of an echo chamber for those of us in the media and those of us around politics. And so I really don't know like if there will be a place for that in the same way.
So like you see those two guys standing in the back of the room talking while we're doing this? These are the kind of persuadable voters that we don't know, are they going to be engaged in the election?
They're not.
Or
They're
are
not
they
even
just
listening.
going to tune out? You don't know whether they're just going to talk all the way through it and totally ignore it, or are they going to engage? You just don't know. So that's what we're waiting to find out, I think, substantially.
I think I do know, actually. I think I know the answer to that.
Looks like
to be honest
will
with
be
you.
central to
That's
our
right.
coverage.
Yeah.
Shaming
Yeah.
the electorate is our job. That's right.
It works great too.
That's right.
Yeah.
Works every
really
time.
gets people to our
No
side.
one else in this room does that, though.
No,
so.
no,
No.
It's all love.
So thinking about, let's start with Maeve, thinking about the way that media is covered now at the local level quite often is with a national view. And I think a lot of folks in this room experience that, where we're working on a campaign somewhere and we may be talking to a local reporter, but they're looking for an angle they know is actually going to get clicks at the national level. And talk about from your perspective how that works and how you see that affecting what we do.
Well, I think that, as everyone in this room is dealing with this shrinking, press landscape and fewer reporters who are trying to cover more things with limited bandwidth, it makes your job so much more important in terms of thinking about the framing of a story ahead of time, how you pitch it, and let's just say that it's a race in a congressional district that is pretty specific to that district. Thinking through like all of the potential dimensions of the story and how these campaigns tie to the threads in the national conversation at that particular moment, I think becomes so much more important, because that makes it so much easier for whatever local reporter you're talking to go back and pitch it to their editors, and to have this sort of more global view. And I think that, that it also, as a former local reporter, I was sort of back, the entire Pittsburgh Post-Gazette Washington Bureau got laid off, except for me at one point, back when I was working in 2004, and that felt like sort of the beginning of what we're facing now across the country. It helps so much also to have built relationships with sources that you trust over time. And I think that that's a really important aspect of dealing with this new landscape is, figure out the reporters that you think are really smart, who hustle, and get to know them before you need something. Have coffee or lunch, think about ways in which you could be helpful to them on like other races or just what you're hearing or trends that you're spotting. And I think that, when you can build those relationships over time, then when it gets to a point where you're pitching a story that's really important to your candidate, you already have that relationship set and you're going to be able to get their attention in a way that, other people who just bombard us with like emails or calls, I mean, it's just like instantly like delete when people are sending me press release stuff.
Well, that's a good follow-on, Chris. Maybe you can, what do we get wrong? And in our industry, when we're trying to get stories for our clients, when we're trying to interact with you, what are the biggest mistakes that we make that you see that's not going to work?
Well, first, let me say, I never want to have coffee. Do not ask me to have coffee. I am not interested in meeting you.
I love coffee. Everyone asks me
I
to
love
coffee.
coffee, and I'm drinking it all the time. But no, I do not want to meet you for coffee at 10 o'clock at the Starbucks on New Jersey Avenue. Look, what we miss often, and I don't know what you do wrong. I know what I do wrong, and I know what we do wrong in our business. So the shelling of the local news business, and you see it here in California, right? The newspaper in Salinas now has 0 reporters. right? The slow death of Gannett as it ripples through all of the races that you're working on, right? So there was formerly a symbiotic relationship. You had local press, they wanted the oppo, they wanted the scoop, they wanted the story, and you could get a URL, you could get it into the pipeline, and you could move it up, right? Didn't matter where the story was generated, but it could feed into the narrative in a statewide race or in a national race. Well, those places are going away, right? The number of, we lost 53,000 newsroom jobs between 2010 and 2020. Where were they? They were not in Washington. We didn't lose the jobs in Washington. We lost them in communities around the country. So the hollowing out of local news has serious consequences. One of the consequences is it multiplies, amplifies the effect of all races are national. Every race gets covered like a dumb national race. You're running for dog catcher of Wolf Knuckle County. How are you on the January 6th committee? Where do you come down on these questions, sir? And it's, so I don't know what you're doing wrong. I know that what we're doing wrong is we're screwing up politics because we've hollowed out local news and have an unhealthy obsession with low quality national blabber news.
I think, yeah. How do you follow Chris again? To Maeve's point though, I do think like this idea of building relationships and again, like knowing what we're interested in as reporters can be really useful, especially for lower ticket races that are not getting a lot of attention. So like, if you're running a legislative race in California, I can't cover all 120 of them, right? I mean, they're not all up at once, but let's say like 80 at a time. But I cover a lot of criminal justice policy. Like, is there a hook there with a candidate or two that you could pitch me? Like, it doesn't even have to be the national stuff. I mean, obviously that, you know, is beneficial if it goes viral or something. But I think a lot of times just getting your candidate or issue's name out there is what you're looking for. And I think for us, if there's a way that we can do that, we're not just gonna write a story because like you have an interesting candidate, but if you have something where they're pushing a policy or they have a really interesting backstory, I think that that is an area where like, and again, like, you don't even have to have coffee, like maybe you just get a sense of things. But I do agree with Maeve. I mean, I think that often in this business on both sides, relationships built before we're all on deadline is what does matter. And it also means that I can be really honest with you. Like, sorry, dude, I'm not covering that, but maybe, you know, X, Y, or Z, instead of, you know, just what I was doing on the plane right here, literally, which was just like going through my email by name and just wholesale deleting, because you get these pitches and they're sent to 50,000 other people. Like, why should I give you my time when you're not really giving me yours?
Well, Marisa, I'll start the next question with you so you won't have to follow Chris this time. But you mentioned social media before. This is now 2 panels in a row that Twitter got slagged off in front of everybody. You know, that has changed the landscape dramatically for us. How has it changed it for you when you're doing your job on a daily basis that we should know about? When we are trying to interact with you and we're trying to get to know you, what should we be keeping in the back of our mind of how that constantly shifting world of social media is going to affect what you're trying to do in your job?
That's a good question. I mean, it's funny, like when you take a step back from these sites, you realize like how much BS there is, right? Like, I don't actually think on balance Twitter is helping me do my job because Twitter isn't the real world. Like, it is an echo chamber and it has to do with who you follow and what world you're in. And, you know, if you're a sports person, then that's all you see on Twitter. If you live in San Francisco like I do, all you see is people hating on San Francisco. Like, so I actually think the best thing we can all do is like get away from our computers and actually go talk to humans. So I sort of, that said, like, it's nice to be able to easily track what's happening, right? If you're covering a certain story, if you want to know kind of what folks in our world are talking about. So I don't know where the next place is going to be, but I do think that there could be a benefit to it. And
It depends who you want to talk to, right? I mean, when I'm doing my other day job on Capitol Hill, I mean, the way that news shoots through that place is, one senator happened to be on the other side of the complex, and I'm standing in the House, and, okay, Senator Cruz said that, now I got to ask the nearest lawmaker about this, right? I mean, it's helpful just for the sheer breadth of it. And when I think about campaign coverage, if Nikki Haley's in Iowa and Tim Scott's in New Hampshire, I can't be in both places at once, but I'm really glad someone's tweeting about it because I can have it. The video or something, I can have it instantly. And I think from the perspective of, who gets what wrong, I think there is an appetite for maybe not a full story. I'm not going to go out and do an entire feature on one legislative race, but there is a potential for, all right, you give me a little scoop, I can tweet it. There's still traffic in that. It gets picked up in that same zeitgeist. But that's if you want to talk to like the DC media crowd, as opposed to if you want to get voters, if you want to get people engaged. I mean, all of you are in the persuadability business. You know how to better do that. And I don't always think it's through press. I think a good story with good characters and good personal connection can do that. I will always say that. But I don't know that a live shot about polls on MSNBC, while amazing, is going to necessarily move voters because we know who's baked in that audience, right? But Twitter, I mean, I joke about it as a hellscape. I prefer it for like watching The Bachelor than I do for, Capitol Hill, which, by the way, The Bachelor was shot here.
Ooh.
I know, guys, everyone else is here for that reason too,
Who got the VD
right?
suite? That's really, congratulations, whoever.
Tasha didn't do that. But, that's the pro and con of Twitter. It kind of depends who you want to talk to.
Well, and also I think, I think even like Instagram sometimes will be a place where more local candidates will like catch your eye. Not just, obviously will catch the eye of voters, and that's why you guys do it, but some of the personal stories that they tell or the ways in which you can reveal who they are in those lighter moments, like those are ways in which to like get the attention that you're looking for.
On behalf of, I think, many of my colleagues, one of the things that we believe is that Twitter and social media has altered the first versus right paradigm a little bit, right? So can you guys kind of speak to that a little bit? I mean, it feels like sometimes things get wrong because they have to be out immediately and people have to sort of beat each other. Now, I think that's actually been more true always, and it's always been a problem, but it just feels worse to us now that I need to get this right versus I'm going to get beaten paradigm has been shifted.
So I don't know whether anybody saw the news today, but my former employer, Fox News, paid some money to some people for some things. I don't know what, but it was complicated. What they say, the first 3/4 of $1 billion is the hardest to make, and after that it gets easier. Our media is so siloed, right? So narrowcast that many of the people who are watching Fox News, if they know about it, they don't even care about it, right? It's like it was a glancing blow off the top. Now, if they switched over to MSNBC or CNN, they would see like Jake Tapper, who is my friend, who I like, is like rolling around it like a dog in a dead deer, like, oh, this is the most amazing story ever. And that does.
True story. I was flipping back and forth this afternoon. It was wild.
He was vibing.
Meanwhile, on Fox.
Right, on Fox, you're like,
Didn't even happen.
brief statement, moving on. So those things don't touch each other, right? So if you look at how Ron DeSantis got to where he got, right? So what he did was he used the media as a punching bag, right? I'm not talking to the mainstream press. I'm not talking to you. You stink, Washington Post. And his press team used that bank shot to smack the mainstream press in the face, and that gets admiring treatment in the silo where he's trying to reach. Anybody who wants to can meet me afterward, and I will vituperate America's terrible primary system at any length that you want, and I happily will do that. But in a system where primary elections are as important as they are, part of what you're talking about of this siloing and this breaking down creates these perverse incentives for communication. And our business models, by the way, are predicated on that siloing, right? So we went from broadcasting to narrowcasting. And we went from trying to have broader arguments, broader discussions to appeal to more kinds of voters, more kinds of consumers, to buy more kinds of pillows and more kinds of free lubricated pocket catheters, to just serving these people, and that makes it weird.
Thank you for answering my question.
I'm so glad we have our drinks up here.
I saw My Pillow in the wild the other day, and I was like, oh.
It's not a great pillow. It's
No?
not. It's not. It's a lumpy.
Moving on.
I kind of judged the lady.
Can I have a serious point though on that?
Sure.
Like, I love being first. I think all of us up here love to scoop our competition. That's an open call to anyone in the room. But I am really thankful for our great standards department and the lawyers and the people who tell us, like, not everything requires you to tweet about it. Sometimes not tweeting is an answer, or sometimes just making sure that, like, you've gone through the process of getting your sources approved, which is how we do it internally at NBC. Like, I'd rather be second than wrong.
Yes.
Agree.
Yeah.
Agree.
Because, like, all we have is our credibility ultimately, right? And
Yeah.
so that, and also I think often what you see is this, like, feedback loop within the media where, like, we're all at a press conference tweeting the same thing. Like, I've just stopped at points. I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, I could just retweet everybody next to me. You know, like, it's not a scoop. So I do think maybe one upside of the Twitter drama is, I don't know, just like a bit of a rethinking of this to some extent.
How many stories were dribbled out and wasted in tweets?
Totally.
If you look at the dynamic of the coverage of, just take the Russia story and Trump, right? If you would have put out the Bob Mueller story, the Bob Mueller, if it had come out and there had been none of the quadrillion missed stories that led up to that, it would have been a huge bombshell. It would have been this giant thing. But by the time it came out, everything had been so dribbled out and contradicted and, well, actually, he didn't pee on it. Like, it was so, everything had been so muddied by the fact that in the race to be first and have some incremental story to win the next 5-minute cycle, that by the time you got to the end, it was, eh. And I think one of the lessons that we've learned about social media, put it in the story, right? Yeah. There are times, just as you say, where you got a little thing where you're like, oh, big buy in Iowa 5. Okay.
Because it's not a story.
It's not a story.
Right.
But I think the lesson that big time newsrooms have learned, my colleagues in other places, the people at the Dispatch, the people at News Nation, I tell, put it in the story.
Yeah.
Right? Don't sit on Twitter all day tweeting this crap out. Put it in the story and write it down. Harumph.
So, Allie, I'm going to start with you, and I apologize because I think this is probably the hardest question I would ask. But,
Okay.
you know, being a contributor at CNN and being a political consultant, I feel like I was sort of bridging these worlds, and there was a lot of bonding in a sort of thank you for smoking way at how our industries are viewed sometimes. And so, why is that? Why is the media viewed poorly and getting worse, and there's a lack of faith in the media, and that seems to be getting worse, and what can we do about it?
So I actually take this as like a very personal approach because I think about it a lot, right? In the same way that we talk about I'd rather be second and wrong than first or second and right rather than first and wrong. Like, I think it starts with personal accountability. I mean, for me, when I read news, I read a byline. I don't read an organization. There are people who I trust, who I know are good reporters, who are solid, who will take responsibility when they're right, and they'll take responsibility when they're wrong. I try to be that person as well. And I think that's the way that you build trust with your audience. Now, all of us are part of larger organizations, and I love my organization. I cannot take responsibility for NBC, MSNBC, NBC News Now, I mean, all of the platforms. But I don't think that that's my personal responsibility. Like, I go to work every day and I do the best that I can, and I think that every reporter on this stage and that we're all friends with do the exact same thing. There's a counter to this, right, which is that we are in this tinderboxy environment right now. Trump certainly was someone who metastasized this problem, but it was around well before him. It's easy to fundraise off of swiping at the media. Everyone here knows that. But I do think that when you dehumanize an entire group of people and just call them the media, it makes it easier to just utterly despise them. And I do think that there's a little bit of gut checking that voters have to do too. I mean, the number of people who I meet when I'm covering Republicans, Democrats, doesn't matter, who are like, oh, you ask fair questions. Yeah. Oh, you just want to know what I think? I love that someone's asking me what I think. Like, that is, like, I think when I look at it, the most basic function of how I see my job. And so there is a little bit of thank you for smoking, and I think everyone's contributed to that. But when I think of how to combat it, I don't have some lofty, utopia. It's personal for me. Like, I want to do the best that I can for our viewers and readers.
And I think there was a period where, just because it was like Trump's shtick, like every time he got up at a rally and had everyone turn around and yell at the reporters on the riser, that there was a period where when we were, out all over the country, and I tried to spend a lot of time in like parking lots, Costco parking lots specifically, talking to voters, because it takes people a really long time to load up the back of their trunk from their cart.
This
so
is
they're
the
like,
best tip I'm going to get all
This is
weekend.
actually a
I hear
really
all
good
week.
tip.
I just
they're
want you to know.
stuck, and they have to keep talking to you.
We can use that too. That's pretty useful.
For sure, yeah.
But there was a period I felt like when it just, and it feels a little better right now, but where I couldn't believe like the number of people that were sort of shouting in my face when I would go out and just, as soon as I would say who I was or whatever, just saying like, well, the media lies and you should be ashamed of your profession and all of that, like that just kind of got out into the ether, and I don't know sort of what the solution is for that. It feels like the temperature has lowered a little bit now, partly because we have such a competitive primary, but that part of it, I don't know how that gets fixed, and it's a really challenging thing that, that we're all facing, because I do think that, when you talk to people long enough, even if they start by shouting at you, and I always continue the conversation because I think that's fun, you can generally win them over the course of however many minutes by asking fair questions and making it clear that you're there to tell the whole story. But I would really hate to see us get to that point where, it's so polarized that the whole story is not being told.
The name of my boss, Yuval Levin, has a great book called A Time to Build. And we have been through a generation in this country of just tearing institutions down to the studs, ripping everything down as far as possible. A very cynical, you people run people for Congress who say how much they hate Congress, right? You run people for Congress and their platform is, I hate Congress, send me there. I demand that you send me to this absolute hole that I will go there and suffer as I sit in Congress. Sounds great. It sounds like a total blast. The sustained attack on institutions that we have endured in this country. And by the way, as you say, as we're pointing out, frequently deservedly, right? Frequently deservedly. But whether it is organized religion, whether it is the government, whether it's politics, whether it's the media, attacking the establishment, attacking the status quo is good business, right? It works really, really well. And one of the reasons that I'm here with you guys is because I see in your organization an effort to build, right? To build ethically, to have standards, to have community, to have organization. And what we have to do as journalists is the same thing, is that we have to hold each other accountable, but in a constructive way. Because no offense to Brian Stelter, but nobody cares what CNN said about Fox. And nobody at Fox cares what, you know what I mean? These things are all happening in a vacuum, and they're all done. I used to joke that Fox needed a CNN on Fox, and CNN needed a Fox on CNN, where it'd be like Mystery Science Theater 3000, and they'd have Lou Dobbs sit down in the front and be like, more lies from CNN, continue after this. And everybody would get what they wanted out of it, but there's no accountability in it. And I think what we need to do is, in lovingly hold each other accountable and hold ourselves to a higher standard. And this is a time to build, and that's why we're here, that's why you're here, because that's what this is.
Please. I have a really random analogy that probably two people will get, but does anybody remember the Pirates of Penzance? Gilbert and Sullivan. So there's this like whole thing like individually I love you all, collectively I hate you. And I think that's true for like y'all, for us, for lawyers, right? Like people, it's this grouping that often is the problem. And this is where I'm gonna give a shout out for like local and regional media. Like I have a relationship with the people that listen to my weekly show and podcast because they know me, and like I do think that that matters. Like that can help build those sort of relationships. So I do think it's worth thinking, like even though when you're pitching a story, like you want to get it in the Washington Post, but there's also a value in trying to find what is left of local media and regional and state, and like figuring out ways to get those stories, because again, like a lot of the people doing that work are on the ground having, living in those communities and having those relationships.
So yeah, that takes me to what'll be my last question, then maybe we can have some questions from the audience just to kind of tee that up. But so if you were sitting down with a group of brand new political operatives that had not worked in a campaign before, and you wanted to describe to them, especially at the local level, what's news? Because we cover news. That's what we're supposed to cover. We talked about this recently. News doesn't cover all the planes that land. Because the ones that don't land are the ones that are news, right? And so you can't, without getting so specific, but just as a paradigm, if you're gonna sit down and say, hey, you're gonna run this campaign, you wanna get coverage, here's what the news is that would interest us.
Do you want what is new, what should be news and what's wholesome, or what will get you a URL and what will get you the crackle? What will get you the crackle is personality. It will be empty controversy between two people. You can get 1 million clicks. There was a hearing where Mazie Hirono and Ted Cruz had an argument about what mansplaining was. Never has there been a dumber moment in American political life than this empty, vacuous hearing where these two people were dunking on each other for hashtag content. That's great content. It affects nothing. It changes nothing. If you want to do it in a virtuous way, you're looking for stories where it affects somebody's life and there are real consequences out of it, not just, he said she sucks, she said that he was wrong to say that she sucks, but he said that so the Umbridge Olympics where it just goes on forever and ever and ever, those are the empty calories. If you want to really have it connect and do something good for the country with your work, focus on the things that affect somebody's life and that are real, not just the personality argle-bargle.
I'm not as cynical as that, and I also don't think that it has to be all one or none of the other. Like, I look at the ways that we were able in 2020, for example, to cover the ways that these candidates were differentiating themselves, even when they were talking about wine caves as a toss back to anyone who was there.
Nice.
But also, like, there was a lot of substantive discussion of policy, and it was because candidates decided to drive their message around it, whether it was Elizabeth Warren or others. Like, you can do both, right? And I think that candidates in this environment have to do both. You have to pitch me on, Q1 fundraising numbers that are so good you just want them out there somewhere. You want to pitch me on, the incremental hires at the state level for presidentials that are just gearing up. I love all that stuff, and I think people who are into it want to read that stuff. They want to read the policy, whatever, but I think they also want to read, the way that your candidate connects with a little kid who talks about running for office and how they urge them to do that with a pinky promise, right? Or it's them deciding that their news cycle of the day is going to be mansplaining or not to mansplain. And that tells me something about those candidates too. That tells me that their focus is there, and you can decide if that's the kind of candidate that you want or not. But if I were to tell someone what is news, I think that's on you guys to tell me what the news is, right? Now, I have a pretty good barometer. I know the issues that I'm interested in, but I think we can do both, and we do both. I'm not as overly cynical about it, I don't think. I think it's okay to do both.
Make your candidate available?
Yes.
Seriously, especially in California, Republicans, just let us talk to them. I will put them on the air. I have a half-hour show every week that's dedicated to biographies and what put people into politics, but you would be amazed at how many people are just terrified to even talk to us, right? Or who have decided that that's not a benefit, and I mean, that's a decision you can make, but then you can't complain when you feel like my story isn't as even, because I literally, I drove to the Central Valley this summer to try to do a story on a congressional race and couldn't even connect with one of the candidates, campaigns, let alone them personally. So I think And again, that gets back to what we were talking about, which is like building relationships with reporters you trust. So you know you're not walking your candidate into some crazy ass thing, right? But to be able to say like, hey, this is a person, like, okay, maybe I'm on KQED, you know, NPR. There's a lot of chatter about what we do right now, but like, if you know the person who will be interviewing you, if you understand the history of the type of, you know, stories they've done, I think, you know, making your candidates and clients available can go a really long way.
And also, like, if you're thinking about it but wavering, you know, I think it's important to just get on the phone and have an off-the-record conversation about, you know, what they're most interested in, and like that can kind of intersect with what your objectives are, and make a decision from that point. But I think like the knee-jerk reaction, just like saying no because like all media is liberal, I think is really like a wasted opportunity for both sides.
Totally.
One thing I try to impress upon politicos and candidates, in every interaction with reporters, so you have, I want to absolutely affirm the relationship, build the trust with an individual reporter, and you can find them at any outlet, right? If you're a Democrat, there's somebody at a right-wing outlet that might be great and reliable. If you're a Republican, there might be somebody at a left-wing outlet who's great and reliable. Look for the individual, not the overall brand, is certainly the case. But I guess I think about it this way. If you disagree, if I did it wrong, if you don't like the piece that I wrote, right? Call me up.
Yes.
Tell me.
Don't
Call
tweet
me
it.
up and tell me, hey, this is crazy, da da da. I want to get it right. I want the story to be right. I want it to be accurate, and I want it to be fair. Now, if I fail, I want to know, and I want you to tell me. And I want to see what we can do about that. But if you look at that as an opportunity to attack the press, right, then we just go further into our bunker. Then we're like, oh, the lying press has done it again. Here they are, and you get what you want out of it, and I can get what I want out of it too, because I can be a victim, right? I can be like attacked, I can be a martyr. You know, you made me think about in New Hampshire, being penned like veal in the back of a gymnasium as Donald Trump is screaming at us, the lying press in the back. And there are angry people, right, packed in around us. And we're standing inside this little metal barricade. And it's like, this is probably not good. This is probably suboptimal. Though I would love it that with Acosta, they would like scream at him profanities, and then they'd get his autograph afterward.
Yeah. Super normal.
And to that end, I'll just tell this very brief, by my standard story, which is, we had a debate at Fox in Detroit right when the Republican primary was going right down the tubes. This was right at the period of Little Marco and you better believe me, there's no problem in that area, all of that stuff. And it was wild. And we were really worried about the crowds. We were really worried about the people who were in the debate hall because they were getting rowdy. It was like WWE. And I'm walking up the aisle doing a check in the room, see what the energy's like before the debate. And there's these two ladies. One of them is definitely named Barb. And wherever you are, Barbie, I love you. And they're there with their adorable sweaters on. Oh, hello. Oh, hello. Hi, nice to meet you. Yes. Oh, love you, love you, love you. And as I'm talking to one, I look down, and in her backpack, her friend has a 12-pack of Ice House beer in her backpack. So here are these two, like, hot dish Lutheran ladies who have shown up with a bunch of brewskis to go to a presidential debate. They did offer me a beer, which I wanted but did not consume. But what I always think about that, what are those consumers coming for, right? They want the show. They want the smackdown. They want to hear the bad thing that he said about that and the other thing. And it is the shortest way to get it. The shortcut is to talk about, to be super negative, super nasty. It's what our viewers want and consumers want. And just to continue to be as lame as possible, we have to show restraint. You have to show restraint, and we have to show restraint, because some of these things are too corrosive and bad for. The shortest way I can put it is, Donald Trump is the candidate that we really wanted. right? He was the candidate the people in the political press had wanted all the time. He was accessible constantly. He was controversial constantly. There's a clip that Bloomberg did. Have you ever seen the Woolman ice rink Zamboni clip? This is like the greatest. So John Heilman and what's his name? Mark Halperin are riding on a miniature Zamboni with Donald Trump, riding around the Woolman ice rink. And they're asking him like, what's a date? What do you like to have for breakfast? What's going on? And the normal political establishment couldn't handle it because they were like, should we tell them what's on Marco's iPod? I don't know, is it too soon to say Pitbull or not? And Trump is like, I'll show you my iPod, come over here. So Trump was what we wanted. We got what we wanted, and I'd sort of say we got what we deserved.
I like.
Where's your drink?
I actually like to joke that that in some ways Donald Trump was the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man that the media conjured up in their own mind and then came after them. And the thing you have to remember, his name has been brought up a lot, and so I just have one comment to make on this, which is that he has figured out with those rallies that is entertainment. And the media are a part of the entertainment to him because he then turns out to be incredibly accessible to them behind the scenes, talking to them all the time. So he made them a part of the show. And it's not a new thing. I'm looking at some of my older friend colleagues here who remember that in 1992, one of the bumper stickers for George H.W. Bush was "Annoy the media, re-elect Bush." So this is not new ground, actually. It just feels it, I think, sometimes. But with that, we have some time left for questions. I can't see anybody to raise their hand.
Just shout. That's my usual press conference posture.
No questions for the
right
media?
there.
It's your chance to ask them a question. There we go.
So I hear a lot about Twitter. I hear a lot about everything else, but TikTok. What's your take on TikTok, especially with, what's going on at the federal level with just the CEO coming in and a bipartisan group of, legislators just going against him. So what's your take on TikTok?
I've just been hoping they shut it down before I have to join. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, I watch Instagram Reels like a self-respecting
Exactly,
adult.
yeah, like I'm in my 40s, which I am. I mean, I think, as a media organization, we use it at KQED. I actually did my first TikTok recently, but much younger people shot it and edited it. I kind of feel like we're at the whims that the entire public is, which is that clearly there are a lot of people on it and we all want to benefit from those eyeballs, but I think the skepticism is totally fair. I haven't seen any news orgs pull out of it the way I have, Twitter, obviously. And I guess my theory on all of this is even if they, if TikTok gets banned or pulled back, something else will take its place. We're all gonna have to continue to just deal with this changing media landscape and figure out ways to become more fluent in it, regardless of what it is.
I also just am somewhat astonished sometimes about the level of misinformation that sort of lives out there. It's like when you have conversations with voters and they come up with information that is completely wrong about any number of candidates.
When they say, I read it, and you're like, no, you watched that.
No, they'll say oh yeah, I saw it on TikTok.
Yeah.
And so it feels like feels like a really difficult problem that all of you guys are having to deal with in that sense, but.
Hi there. I'm going to try to piece this together. My name is Nancy, by the way. Nice to meet you all. The question I have is this. Growing up as a child, we would watch the news together as a family and discuss it at dinner time. So I think that a lot of the things that we are currently seeing in today's environment is pretty much since probably a little bit before the O.J. Simpson thing, the sensationalism of journalism has taken away the civics education piece from the news. And a lot of times as a parent, I don't want to put on the news because I can't predict what is going to be played as a parent to my child. And I think that has really impacted what the responsibility is from the news as far as civic education for everyone, from a child to an adult. And it's the education that's going to keep our democracy healthy. And I think that's one of the things that's really impacting politics right now. So I wanted to get your viewpoint on it to see how you felt about the news that is currently playing right now, where we tend to pick sensationalized items or Hollywood items, and we tend to blow a lot of subjects out of the water where we really should be educating everyday Americans.
Holly?
Clearly NPR is the answer here, but that's just me.
Oh, me. I mean, look, again, I think that we can do both. And I also think that viewers are tuning in on certain networks knowing what they're tuning in for, right? I mean, I think there is a little bit of that. I also look at myself as someone who has at least a modicum of control over the stories that I pitch and the way that I try to, do the civic engagement piece of this, which is my only goal at the beginning of the day is to break down the barriers of information that people might have so that they can make informed decisions about the people who will have an impact on their life. Like, I'm a political reporter. I like to talk about policy. I like to talk about the way that that's going to impact you as a person. For anyone trying to pitch stories, like that's a great way to get a story landed. If you've got a great character, that's, bread and butter for people like me and us. I think that there's that, and then there's also the way that the candidates have a piece of control over the way that they drive the conversation in their own races. And that's not where I come in, it's not where we come in, it's where y'all come in when you're strategizing around how these races are gonna go. And I know that you can argue it's chicken and egg, who's asking who to respond to Trump or DeSantis or whatever, but I mean, the candidates have the control over what they say, and then we have to cover that, right? So I think there's a dual function here.
I hear in your question, what was your name again? Nancy. I hear in your question a brokenheartedness that I hear when I travel around this country from people about how the news is now and how our national discussion is. There is a real soul sickness in America today, and I don't mean to be a downer before you go back to the bar, but it divides families, right? It breaks hearts. It's tearing us apart, and we can feel it, and we know it's not wholesome, right? We know it's not good for us. I use the analogy of the obesity epidemic. For 100,000 years of our species, what was the struggle? To get enough calories, right? You see the pictures of the guys from the 19th century, they're built like me, and you're like, very sexy, very successful. He's clearly able to get enough calories. And it's like, more ham, sir? Yes. Now, the way that you demonstrate, the people out here, I call them Slim Jims. They're tanned to the color of Slim Jims with their skinny bird legs sticking out of the bottom of their golf shorts as they go around. They're demonstrating how rich they are because they can have a personal trainer and they can eat the best food and they can do all of that stuff. Our media problem is a problem of abundance fundamentally. Right? It is a demand side problem where for most of human history, it was too hard to get information. The era that you're talking about where there was a more civically minded thing, that wasn't the fairness doctrine in the FCC primarily. That was the fact that it was a sacred trust and it was new and it was treated, after a scary time at the beginning, it was treated as something special and something different. That got exploded in the 1990s and it's not coming back. We're not going to go back to that. So we have to build a new thing. And much like with the obesity epidemic, we have to do better, right? We have to do a better job. But consumers have to do better, right? There is a filial patriotic obligation that you have to each other as news consumers to be well informed and fairly informed and know what other people are thinking and doing so that you can be a reasonable partner with them in self-government.
Listen to NPR.
On that note, thank you to the panel. Thank you, all of you, for sharing your knowledge with us. It is very helpful to this audience to hear from you and to learn from this. So thank you very much. And thank you all in the audience for staying and for the chattering went down in the back and they were listening. So it sounds like it was a hit.
The vote.
And I know the 40 under 40 reception is next. So look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you very much. Oh, saying right here. Look forward to seeing you right here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.